We're going to drop this episode literally this week, and it's Valentine's. So what advice would you have for young women looking for love and not being able to find it? What are you seeing a common pattern of?
The first place to start is your relationship with yourself. You need to be able to show up for yourself emotionally and have inner confidence. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. To set yourself up for success, you really need to have a really solid relationship with yourself to even know what you're needing out of a partner. You're going to feel so empty inside that you're expecting more from another person than they can ever give you. I would like to see every couple, when they decide to commit, just do 5 sessions of couples therapy. Just 5. Wouldn't that be great?
Amen. Julie Menanno, today is my guest. I fell in love with your profile and everything you share on relationships. And obviously, I'm a fan of your last book, The Secure Relationship, that I actually gave out at our last Biohack-it supper club just almost a week ago. So I'm excited to bring you on because I think my audience loves talking about connection and relationships and how important that is when it comes to optimizing your life. So thank you for coming on to Biohack-it and being a guest today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I really appreciate you having me. There's nothing I love more than talking about my work. So win-win.
So I'm going to give everybody a little background on Julie. So Julie is a trailblazing therapist, author, educator, and a masterful interpreter of attachment theory, something I'm really excited about discussing. As a creator of The Secure Relationship, she has reached millions worldwide, revolutionizing the way we understand emotional intimacy and human connection. Julie's mission is to bridge the gap between complex psychological concepts and everyday struggles, empowering individuals to cultivate deep, connected, secure relationships. Thank you for coming on and doing this. These are things that are so important, and I don't think enough people talk about, Julie. So I think the fact that you've taken a science and brought it into theory and have given people tips to actually implement it is a win-win for everybody.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, it's been a real gift to me personally to be able to give this back. I mean, as you know, I'm a couples therapist, so this is what I do every day, many hours a day, is use this work and this beautiful theory of attachment to help couples connect and grow and heal. And so to be able to reach a broader audience than what I can do in my office is just beyond fulfilling.
And how are you balancing it out right now between, writing, kind of like showing up online on social media and balancing being a therapist?
It's hard. I mean, I have had to cut back on my therapy practice in just the last month or so. I was pushing myself a little too hard. So what I've really tried to do is back off a little bit in every area. And so, my passion is working with couples, and everything I know is because of my work with couples. So I can never give that up. For one, I'd lose my edge. And for two, it's what fills me up the most. So, I think it's just, as you probably know, a constant process of tweaking and figuring out what life is bringing to you at that season and adjusting.
I think also what you do really beautifully is making sure that how you're showing up the world to help other people connect and bond from the learnings that you're having. And I think your work kind of speaks for that, not only in your book, but the way you kind of communicate it on social media. Somebody's maybe having a rough day or they're stuck with a partner in a relationship problem and they go to your page and they're like, this is like free advice from a therapist. This is amazing. Why am I not thinking of things in this way?
If I can provide people with a reframe in their day and make them go home to their partner with a different mindset, one person does that, my job is done for the day. Honestly, I feel so good thinking that can happen.
I wanted to know, can you explain a little bit to our audience, what is attachment theory and why is it the foundation of your work?
Well, attachment theory, basically, it's an idea that, look, humans are driven to eat to survive. We're driven to procreate to survive as a species. And we are also driven to connect. The drive to connect and have safe relationships with close people is a survival strategy. You can't override it. I mean, some people have to learn to override it if they're in so much emotional pain that, they have, they're wired to stay safe. That's an exception. And even they aren't completely free of the wiring. But the point is that the vast majority of humans are driven to have connections and driven to have safe connections and get these attachment needs met. The need to feel understood, the need to feel validated, the need to know that your needs matter to your most important. I mean, I work in the context of romantic relationships. So I'm talking about partners, the need to feel heard, the need to feel seen, the need to trust, the need to know that you're going to be there for me when I really need you. And couples are just constantly communicating whether these needs are met or unmet in the quality of their communication. And so when couples are communicating with a lot of emotional unsafety, they are unmeeting each other's attachment needs. And if that happens, in the big picture of the relationship, we would call that an insecure attachment. Both partners aren't feeling completely safe and aren't feeling completely close. So my job is to come into that relationship and view it through the lens of attachment. When you guys are in this place where you're communicating with each other in a way that is not emotionally safe, and you're just sending these messages, I don't understand you, I don't validate you, I'm not willing to be curious about you, because they're in their own defensive protective places, then, they're basically destructing their relationship just in these interactions, just sometimes in these day-to-day interactions especially when they're trying to address some conflict and they go into what I call these negative cycles. And then over time, that can really erode the relationship. And then they look back and they go, what happened? What happened? Well, what happened is they together created an insecurely attached relationship.
This goes back to a question that I have, that the attachment styles that you experience as a child, the dynamic between your parents, which is the first relationship you really encounter, if you have negative childhood experiences, does that affect your attachment style? Like, how do you know if your attachment style is healthy or unhealthy?
Well, if you're having relationship problems, the odds are astronomically high that your attachment style is not healthy, because by virtue of the relationship problems, that means there's some communication breakdowns. Usually both partners are contributing to those communication breakdowns. So if we assume that both partners are contributing, then we have to assume that each of them does not know how to deal with their emotions in a way that's healthy. So the way that they're trying to manage, regulate, and communicate their emotions are not healthy. Then we have to take a step backward. That means that they didn't learn how to do that growing up. And the byproduct of not being treated with emotional health and not having your emotional health tended to is having an insecure attachment. It's being kind of never feeling fully safe and close emotionally. And that creates all kinds of acting out. It's kind of like saying, look, you can have parents who are generally loving and, good in a lot of ways, but if they're not, if they're just giving their kids fast food every day for every single meal, you might expect that later on they will have some health problems because of that, And so the same thing, if you don't have parents who know how to be emotionally supportive and emotionally available and not emotionally shaming and not emotionally invalidating, you can assume that that person is going to have a difficult time managing their own emotions. And then when they get in a relationship, that's going to create problems. So it creates problems with self and problems with relationships.
And then how does this work when it shows up in a career, in your professional life? Because a lot of times people bring this attachment style, positive or negative, to their work life as well, with colleagues, with their boss, with their coworkers.
Yeah. So I look at things in moments. So let's say, you go to your boss and you're having a conversation and, your boss says something critical, right? I mean, bosses can say critical things, and whether they deliver it in the healthiest or unhealthiest way, and you have, an emotional reaction to the criticism that maybe isn't the ideal or healthiest emotional reaction because you grew up in a home where criticism was like it took away your entire sense of worth. It was like you're not just getting something wrong, you're wrong, right? So now you're in this situation with your boss, they're being appropriately critical or giving you, feedback, and all of a sudden, whoosh, your body goes into the scared place of, oh my God, what does that mean? I'm failing, right? And then all of a sudden, now how are you going to respond to those feelings? Someone with an anxious attachment, they might respond by getting really defensive or trying to turn the blame back on someone else or getting really frantic about making the boss approve of them. They're going to try to bridge the distance, right? Someone with an avoidant attachment, they might just act like it doesn't bother them, file it away, not say anything, and then, later go have some alcohol to kind of deal with the feelings in there that they're not dealing with overtly. And so it's really a matter, of what kind of feelings and fears you experience interpersonally in the workplace and how you manage those feelings and fears and how you communicate yourself. In the workplace, it's less in the romantic relationship, the healthy way to communicate when you have these big feelings is vulnerably and with healthy assertion. In the workplace, we're going to do less of the vulnerability and more of the healthy assertion.
And when we talk about healthy assertion, what exactly do we mean by that?
We mean a healthy assertion of your own needs, right?
Okay.
I know how to talk about, here's what I'm needing, and I'm also in that talking about what I'm needing. I'm open to hearing about what you're needing, about your part here too. I'm not just going to either bulldoze you with my needs and get aggressive and try to express my needs by telling you everything you're doing wrong, but I'm going to say, here's what's happening for me. When, we're talking about this project here, boss, and I recognize that there are some areas where I slipped up. And, I do want to put this out there, though, that some of this, I felt like there wasn't some, clarity of communication. And then that left me kind of confused. And how can we bridge that gap? And I also am open to hearing more about your perspective on this, right? And instead of overreacting or underreacting. And yeah, so it's healthy assertion is it's not bulldozing the other person, but it's also not shoving your own needs to the side and not speaking up about it.
So one of the things, I'm the founder of a PR marketing agency. So that's what I do on the flip side. So we have, I have a team of like 15, 20 people that I manage, and they're all women. So,
yeah.
And I always tell my team, one of the things that's really important is to take accountability for our work, our feelings, how we show up in the world, right? You can't change the other person, but you need to be accountable and take that accountability and ownership of how you show up in the workplace, and if something goes wrong, it's just like standing back and saying, okay, I could have been done better here, but also communicating what else you needed in order to get to where you need to get to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of that balance between stepping inward, taking ownership for what's going on with you, choosing to communicate yourself in a healthy way.
Because I feel like so many times in our personal life and our professional lives, we so quickly go into victim mentality and then we relinquish our power. It's not just about tough love. It's about when you give your power away to somebody like that, then you're telling your body that you don't have control over your life, over your emotions, over who you are. And that just eats away at you.
Oh, yeah. It's a very disempowering place to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's always trying to encourage people, at least, whether it's my girlfriends in relationships or it's people who work for me, like own your role in things, take accountability for your work, take your accountability in your actions for what you do so that you feel empowered with every decision that you take, knowing that you have a choice to do better.
Exactly. You have more control over these situations than you realize, especially if you've got yourself boxed in to everyone's kind of, I'm always on the losing end. Everyone's out to get me.
Right.
There
was a statistic that I read, and I wanted to ask if you see this because you're coaching couples, you're coaching people day in and day out in your practice and stuff. It was a stat that said nearly 50% of marriages end in divorce due to lack of emotional connection being one of the main primary reasons. Is that one of the reasons most marriages are ending?
That's what I see in my practice. it's hard for me to say statistically. I know, that I have heard that statistic before, but of course I'm seeing the couples that come to me and get better. So, yes, I mean, absolutely, we do have couples who, sometimes there's just a serious incompatibility, right? One wants a family, the other one doesn't, or whatever. Very rarely is that the case, though. Usually, it's not incompatibility. It's the way that they're communicating with each other that is blocking their ability to feel close and to work through their problems together, right? So then they can't work through their problems together. So then they make sense of it as, oh, we're just incompatible. And some people are able to make sense of it as, we have an emotional disconnection. But a lot of people just kind of go into it going, are we incompatible? And I always say, look, I don't know if you're incompatible. I got to figure out how you're communicating with each other and get you into a place of emotional safety before we're going to know. Like, we got to stabilize that and rule that out. And then we'll kind of move on to the next place. And then, some couples are also struggling with sex. In my experience, the emotional piece is usually more the missing link. And a lot of couples, when we clean that up, their sex life will improve. But you do have some couples that, their emotional connection isn't going to improve because one partner is feeling so sexually deprived.
How often should somebody be having sex? Because you brought up the sex thing. So I always wonder, like, what is common and what should be common?
What I've read is that statistically, couples that have sex once a week are happier, are more successful.
Okay.
Of course, a lot of people don't like it when I put that out there because, they feel like you shouldn't give a number. And for some couples, that's true. It's just there is a statistical correlation between once a week and happier, more well-being. And they did rule out are the couples happy or are the couples having more sex because they're emotionally happier? They actually took distressed couples and had them add in sex once a week. And it did actually improve their relationship. Now, there also, the other side to that is that having sex more than once a week doesn't make them any more happier.
Okay.
It's once a week is that kind of
sweet spot.
And then, of course, some couples are going to want more and some couples are going to be fine with once a month or whatever.
Yeah. I've been married for like 5 years now. This will be my 5th year. And sometimes just life happens and you're just so busy, and I'm best friends with my husband and we share everything, but sometimes we just don't always intimacy is a priority and we have to prioritize that in our relationship, right? But sometimes just life is just happening and that doesn't mean either one of us is upset about it. But how do you encourage people? If I came to you and said, Julie, I don't have any problem. It's not like we're not getting along. We're really happy, but maybe we're not carving out enough time for that intimacy. What would you suggest?
My suggestion is going to be try to, because the worst case scenario is that you get out of the habit and then 6 months later, a year later, you're going, oh, we haven't had sex in 6 months. And then it's harder to get back in.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a long time. 6 months. Wow. That would be that would be a very I'd be very concerned at that point.
Okay. Then you're fine. You're aware of it. It's, and the other question is how much of a problem is it causing and how much of a problem might it cause? I kind of think of it, I'm a couples therapist. So of course I have my own way of seeing it, but I kind of think of it as like, we go to we take care of our bodies and, exercise, or we prioritize eating healthy food. And, there's some value to prioritizing some of these relationship behaviors, habits that over time just help us stay stronger. It's kind of like an overall part of self-care, relationship care.
I was at this talk recently in November. Goop and Health had the Goop and Health Summit in LA. And there was, I don't remember her name, but she was a sex coach essentially. And she was talking about how her and her husband, madly in love when they first got together, when they started dating, were having lots and lots and lots of sex. And then one day she just looked over him. They were sitting on the couch and she's like, wait, what happened? Like, where did the intimacy go? Like, what was the breakdown? And then she talked about how she worked it back in. But I think that's also really individual for every couple, right? They're how open they are, what they want to experiment with. Some people even are so uncomfortable even talking about sex, So how do you deal with people from maybe different ethnic backgrounds or different cultures who are like Americans are more comfortable talking about sex. I'm South Asian, I'm Muslim, right? So I come from a part of the world that it's not that comfortable talking about sex. You know, they're a little awkward about it.
Yeah. I mean, so the first thing I would want to know is, do you want to talk more about sex? Is that
Yeah.
important to both of you? And if we have that goal and we create a common goal, then hey, let's kind of take some steps backward and work backward from the goal, which is what's getting in the way. What is so scary about talking about it? You know, again, I want to honor their cultural expectations. But if they're telling me we want to do more of this, then I'm going to explore how has your culture, you know, what are the messages that you got around talking about sex from the culture that you grew up in that maybe kind of got in your way or blocked you from being able to talk about it? And maybe there's some strengths in whatever those messages were too. It's not always black and white. And you know, then I'm going to just kind of dive into the fears. Tell me about the fears. What are you afraid will happen? You know, is it a risk? Are you afraid you'll get rejected? Are some words shameful for you? And then try to kind of process those feelings, get those feelings out on the table. You know, we might need to talk about the shame that you feel. We might need to talk about what happens when you feel rejected, and then just be able to say to your partner, you know, I would like to talk more about this, but I get this fear of rejection, and you know, can I just get some reassurance that if we do go there, that you'll be able to hold me in that? And yeah, so just really talking about what are the blocks and working through those blocks.
In today's culture and where we are as a society, I feel that, and I don't agree with this at all because I believe in monogamy fully through and through, but I feel that, especially in the US, more than some other places I've noticed, the monogamy is not that important to certain relationships and couples anymore. And I hear of these people having these open marriages. To me personally, I know I shouldn't be judging anybody else, but to me, that's a very bizarre concept of having an open marriage. So for the people that you're coaching and seeing, is monogamy still very important to your practice and how you tell people to make a lasting relationship? Or do you see couples who come in and are able to have an open relationship and it's successful?
I have, you know, the vast majority of the couples I work with are monogamous. They're perfectly fine with monogamy. They don't want anything else. I have worked with couples that are, you know, have three members in in throuple, I guess you would say. I'm going to be really honest. I have not seen it work. What I see is that there's so many competing attachments that it's really hard to maintain that in a fair and balanced way. I've seen several situations, and not just me, but the therapists that are on my team have, you know, they've experienced it too. So we kind of come together. It seems like it starts with two, and then they decide they want to be open, and then they bring a third in, and then the next thing you know, one of the first and the third are together, and the other one of the first is on the outs. That happens. So theoretically, you know, I've read about it, and I've heard people talk about it. Theoretically, it could work if we're doing all the right things. I just haven't seen it work, and I'm a little more biased towards probably not a good idea, and I might get some backlash for saying so, but that just is my experience.
I'm very open about saying that I still have those traditional values that
Mhm.
monogamy is important. I look at marriage from a standpoint of a spiritual connection as well. It's not just physical, it's not something like that. You're giving somebody a vow, a commitment that I'm in this with you through and through the good, through the bad, through the ugly. Like, we have made a commitment to each other. And I feel when you add in this other distraction in this corner, then you're not committed day in and day out, right, to this journey. And I think marriage, to some people, are like, well, it's an outdated archive. You know, it's outdated. It's just a contract. But I think marriage is so much more than that.
I agree with that. And I mean, that's probably a lot of why I do what I do. And I think there's something to be said for feeling special. You know, it's like, this is that one relationship where you really get to feel special. And for me, it seems like, you know, if someone else is equally special to me, you know, I couldn't live with that. So
Right.
yeah.
We're going to drop this episode literally this week, and it's Valentine's. So what advice would you have for young women or women in general looking for love and not being able to find it? What are you seeing a common pattern of?
You know, it's hard because there's layers to that. I think that the first place to start is your relationship with yourself, because you need to be able to show up for yourself emotionally and be able to help and care for your own emotions and have inner confidence. Otherwise, it's just not going to work with someone else. Now, that's not to say that it can't work. Two people can come together and not be fully healed, and work through their stuff together if they're both committed to doing that. But to set yourself up for success, you really need to have a really solid relationship with yourself to even know what you're needing out of a partner, right? If you don't know how to self-validate and comfort yourself, it's gonna get all wonky when you have expectations from a partner. Either you're not gonna know what to look for, know what emotional care actually is, or emotional closeness, or you're going to feel so empty inside that you're expecting more from another person than they can ever give you. And another thing I would say, my daughters I have 5 daughters, and
wow. How old are they?
Well, I have a son too. My son's 23, and then my daughters go down to 13. Wow. So we had them all in a 10-year span. So I'm really encouraging my oldest daughter, who's really involved in the dating world, have inner strength. Go into these relationships knowing that you're going to be okay if it doesn't go well. You will be fine. And then another thing is, don't attach until you really know the person. It takes time to really get to know someone, and you really don't know them until you start working through conflict, right? It's the conflict that's really going to make the difference between your relationship. If compatibility and attraction are on board, the make or break is going to be how you navigate through conflict together. Right. So, I think really spend months getting to know someone before you kind of rush in. And yeah, I don't know if that's a thorough enough answer.
No, I think it is.
Yeah.
I also think, what do you think about how people have to learn how to fight with each other? So that everybody has a different style of fighting, but because ultimately you're going to fight, fights come up, arguments come up, right? But it's this thing of some people fight really dirty. And I think that can really leave a tarnish on your relationship.
That's what's going to damage the relationship.
Right.
Conflict creates an opportunity to either get into vulnerability and bond, or get into vulnerability and fight and get protective and protect your vulnerability by, doing all these things within the context of the fight, shutting down, attacking, over blaming, getting really rational. And so that is where things go wrong. And, if couples can either fight and repair later and use the vulnerability that came up during the fight to connect, or they can talk about the feelings that they're wanting to, hey, right now, this is one of those moments where, I'm starting to kind of feel misunderstood, and that's taking me to a disconnected and a lonely place. Can we regroup here? Can we pivot and move this in a different direction and use the vulnerability before it starts to, get out of control?
And what would be your advice for women, or men who've been in a long-term relationship, but they've kind of grown apart, and what was serving them once when they started being together, it's not serving them anymore, but they're too scared to leave. But they're too scared to bring up things to their partner because they might overreact. So,
right.
How would they navigate that?
Yeah. So what you're saying is they've lost closeness and connection, and they've lost the ability to reach each other, whether it's about trying to reconnect or the dishes or whatever. And so once again, the fact that they're disconnected and they're, not knowing how to work together to solve a problem, they're going to go into these negative cycles. Negative cycles unmeet attachment needs. So my first step with that couple, it's pretty structured the way I work, is I got to go in and get you out of these negative cycles. We got to do damage control, right? I've got to get you to the point where you're not getting in these, conversations where you're hurting each other. And then once we get that stabilized and damage control, and they understand how we can actually communicate in a healthy way, now I got to start bringing in bonding. And I bring in bonding by helping each partner really get down into their most vulnerable places their fears, their sadnesses, their griefs, their shame, their negative views of self, and getting them really having these conversations about, when you see me just kind of shutting down, what's really happening inside of me is that's when, I start feeling like I'm just failing. And then that takes me to a place of where my shame wells up and,
Yeah.
maybe talking about some childhood stuff. And it's incredible how people can really start bonding with each other when they start getting real about their feelings. And so now we've got the fight stabilized. They have better communication skills, and we've brought in a lot of emotional connection. And then they just become, their new way of interacting starts to feed on itself. And they do feel close after that, if the therapy is successful.
And then what about like long-term relationships that you met at a certain place in your life, and then, one person's career took off a little bit more than maybe the others? I look at sometimes marriage is always like coming together and a renegotiation of like roles, responsibilities, re-meeting each other and making sure your needs are met. But a lot of times people get together are in these long-term relationships and things have changed. Their dynamic has changed. Their finances might have changed. Their partner might be evolving. How do they cultivate the strengths to go back to this man or woman and say, hey, I have new needs, I have new wants, I have a new list of things that I require, if they're scared that the other person may get really riled up?
Yeah. So the real root of that problem is the other person getting riled up, right? That's where I would need to go first, because we're not going to be able to renegotiate our needs. We got to be able to flex with life, right? The vast majority of couples are going to have different seasons come at them that are, they're going to have to flex to it. But what's you're describing is a situation where they can't flex to it because they can't have the conversation to begin with, because for some reason one partner is getting reactive. Now, I would want to understand, why are you needing to get reactive? And I would also need to understand what partner A's contribution to partner B getting reactive is. It's usually not in a vacuum. There's a reason that this person is getting reactive that involves not only their own personal stuff, but how their partner is communicating to them. Anybody's going to has a potential to get reactive if their partner's coming at them with daggers, right? Or you just never take care of my needs anymore, or whatever. And so I'm going to have to clean that communication up. I'm going to have to say, hey, let's talk about the reactiveness. What happens for you? What comes up in you that your body wants, trust reactive, and then communication is blocked. And so I'm going to help them kind of gradually work through that. And once they get to a place where they can actually talk to each other safely, that's when we can start renegotiating those needs. Here's what I'm needing. Here's what I'm needing. And usually when couples can communicate with each other safely and start to bond, they become more flexible. Their attachment needs are met. And all these other things that they've been clinging to, and been so committed to, don't have so much meaning, because their hearts are getting healed. They're actually getting filled up with the good stuff. And that's not to say that we don't all have, everybody has deal breaker situations. But what I have found time and time again is that when we clean up the communication and we get the bonding, the symptoms just start to sort of take care of themselves.
And how much is money a problem in the couples that you counsel?
It's, with some couples,
like finances
it's
as
a big issue. Yeah. Every couple has their different weak spot. I mean, I think, the things I'm going to see the most of are help around the house, just kind of connection, money, sex, maybe now politics is a big one. So, if I had to put a number on it, let's say 30% of couples are fighting about money.
Yeah, that's pretty high. Yeah.
Maybe less. Maybe less. I see people who tend to have enough money to where they're not fighting about money.
Right.
That's the population I treat. So it's hard for me to have an accurate perception.
Do you, in that bucket of people, and are there sometimes a partner, sometimes maybe a man or a woman, that is extremely controlling with the other partner because he used money as a weapon against them? That happened in my household with my parents. My father use money as a tool against our family. And it was like, either you do you do what I'm saying, or that's it.
Right. And so that if we break that down into attachment issue, whether it's money or whatever else, the message is your needs don't really matter here. You're irrelevant. I'm only going to reward you. My reward is financial, and my way, it's my way or the highway. There's just so many attachment needs that are being unmet through the communication of that I would need to go in and, if I were working with your father, I would be like, what does money mean to you? Help me understand why, what does control mean to you? What happens? What's the fear going on with you that you're so afraid of your people not doing and living like you want, that you need to kind of control them with money? And that's what I'm going to do with anyone. And as you can see, underneath the surface topic, it's kind of always the same material.
Right.
Like, why are you needing to control to begin with?
Because I think people have a fear of not being, what would they be without it? So they don't believe in themselves enough. They don't have enough faith that they're lovable. And this is why the only reason people love them. And then they use that to weaponize it because they feel like that's really what they just bring to the table.
Absolutely. I do a podcast where I work with one couple for 20 sessions and do this attachment work with the actual couple. Season 1 is out now. I just finished it, but I'm sorry, I didn't just finish it. It's been out for a while. I just did my last session with the second partner for season 2. It hasn't been released yet. But so this guy, he grew up feeling like he was, not respected, right? He didn't feel like he got a lot of respect. That took him to I'm unworthy. So what he did is he got really successful in life. He figured out a way to get a lot of money. But it's not just for him money and security. It's money is my sense of worth, right? If I lose my money, I lose my entire sense of worth. I won't be respected. I'll be rejected. I'll be alone. And so his wife the money became an energy with them. And so the wife did some dishonesty. She racked up some credit card debt, right? Okay. So some couples, they might be able to go, okay, that's not okay with me. That you were dishonest, but like, I forgive you. We need to stop that. But like, I forgive you and we'll move on.
Yeah.
He couldn't move on. For him, it was such a big wound because money was his sense of worth. It was his sense of value. So there was so much on the line. For him, his reaction to her spending this money was like somebody else would react if they had an affair because of what money meant to him.
But didn't he didn't just see it. He could not separate himself by saying, okay, I've made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. She's acting out for me, whatever reason, maybe other needs of hers are not being met. So she went and overspec.
He was, eventually he was able, through the therapy, I was able to kind of help her get into, why did you need to do this? Like, what were you dealing with? Tell me about some of the fears. Yeah. And turns out she was walking around the relationship feeling like her needs didn't matter. And if she brought up some things that she wanted to buy, she would just get shot down by him because he was way more frugal. And so she had to learn to kind of go around that and not tell the truth, which she took responsibility for. But we were able to just understand a little bit more about her feelings of being less than in the relationship, right? And so then when she was able to share that vulnerably and her sadness and her, shame around that, he was able to empathize with that. And that helped him come into her world. And it did help soften him. And it did help heal some of those wounds. But really, the work was around her getting down into the vulnerability so he could empathize with that. And then she also needed to be able to understand how it impacted him. And we did the same kind of work over there with him. And
do you ever advise women like this to have their own income and be not financially independent, but always have your own money as a woman? That is a very hard lesson I learned. And I've always applied to myself is like, it's important to always have your own money. Well, it can be small, big, or large. It doesn't matter the quantity. But to have that financial independence so that you have choice in a relationship, so you don't stay in a relationship because of the finances.
I mean, if you're in a relationship with someone that, isn't going to kind of see it as a partnership and our money is kind of like we're a team here. I guess, first of all, I don't think it's bad advice. And that's probably what I would advise to my daughter, right? Or my daughters. But on the other hand, I would want to know a little bit more about why you need to protect yourself. Like why are you needing to protect yourself from this person maybe taking advantage of you? Like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
I
tricky.
think,
I'd probably, there's layers to it. Like different people are going to do that for different reasons.
right.
And some of them I would wonder if that's healthy. Other ones I'd say, hey, this is just a good practice,
When I look at I'll go based on my group of girlfriends. I have a really big group of girlfriends. We're all kind of in our 40s. Most of us are married. So, some of us are in our second marriages now. Some people have been leaving relationships, but majority of us are kind of married. And one of the two common themes that comes up a lot, and we're all very, very close, is one, the women who are not working and the husband, they've been raising kids, they've been focused on, raising the family and stuff. Sometimes it's always like they have to go ask permission for, hey, can I do this? Or hey, can I get budget for this? Or hey, can I do this? And sometimes it can be a hard no. And that doesn't then makes them not feel independent and being able to like make decisions by themselves.
Right. And that's gonna be a recipe for them sneaking around. And, I remember someone I knew in the past would buy Nordstrom gift cards at the market.
Clever girl. That's one was clever. Yeah.
I know. I was like, that's kind of a good idea, but really wrong at the same time. Where I would work with that is, why are you getting a hard no? Why aren't you guys coming together and, making a decision like, hey, here's something I would like to do. Okay, tell me about that. Here's something I would like to do. Okay, tell me about that. And then kind of as a team and a collaboration, come together and make financial decisions together, and instead of just giving each other hard no's, you're flexing with each other. That's what I would be curious about.
But then what about women? I've also had friends, and this has happened. It happened to a friend of mine earlier last year. She was so dependent on her partner, so dependent. She had all her income was kind of coming from him. This guy ended up cheating on her multiple times. She could literally not leave the relationship because she was so scared that she's been with him for 5 years. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? What am I going to... Obviously, it comes down to deeper child-rooted things. They weren't married, though. They were in a long-term relationship. And finally, he kind of ended it with her, so she had to leave. But the lack of financial independence kept her in this really shitty relationship way longer than if she had her independence. So that's the piece that I always look at a lot of my girlfriends and say, it doesn't matter the amount. That doesn't matter, but it's really sometimes important in this day and age where how we're living today is for women to have some sort of something like, I have my own as well. I can get my own back. Like, just to have that.
It's kind of like a prenup, right? Like, okay, I want us to work together and I hope it works out. But if it doesn't, I've got this nest egg.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is that, good or bad? I mean, you're always going to be able to make the argument, is that why the mistrust is there? But then you can make the argument like, look, life can happen. And, there is some value to having some security. I would want to know with her, what was it about being independent, maybe having to have a job, make a lifestyle shift that was so intolerable that she was staying in a relationship that was really damaging and unhealthy? Yeah. So I would, and it's like, I'm assuming that she probably did have the resources to go out on her own. Maybe she would have to have a lifestyle shift.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was getting in the way of her being able to tolerate that new life that was keeping her stuck in something that maybe was worse for her in the big picture?
I think it's fear a lot of times. People are like, well, what's on the other side? Like, what could happen on the other end? Like, what do I restart? What is going to look like? My life will change, but I like my life, but I might not necessarily love our dynamic, but I like my life.
And for some people, that might be okay. It's not my place to judge. For some people, they might actually get to the place where they're like, look, I'm not going to expect emotional connection from this relationship. I'm going to have to accept this person for who they are. Maybe they'll grow, maybe they won't, but I'm going to find other ways to be happy and raise our kids here or whatever,
That topic that you brought up about flexing, I think is so important in relationships. So I applied that to my relationships. So I love jewelry. I grew up, my mom, my childhood memory is that we used to have a family jeweler. My mom studied gemology, so I've always
Nice,
loved
yeah. Well, I
jewelry and
love your
watches.
earrings, by the way.
Thank
I've
you.
been noticing them the whole time. I was like,
They're a gift
I
from my
love the
husband.
combination of that with this,
The
peachy pink.
blouse.
It just looks so
Thank
pretty together.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So my husband, so this is where when we got into our marriage, and I'll use myself as an example, we would fight like crazy when we first got married. Touch wood, now we really work through a lot of our stuff, and we actively were really conscious while working through it. But when we first got married, Julie, we would fight over money like all the time because my husband walked in with this mentality of he's very, very, very frugal and he's very like reserved with his spending. So every time money's leaving his account, he's having like a heart attack. And that comes from a programming of his childhood that they grew up a little bit more simple and he's completely self-made. But he had this like really like any big amount, he'd be like having a heart attack over. I grew up extremely wealthy, but I lost it all because my father and I kind of had this falling out and I kind of got disinherited. But I still had that love for like, I'm used to good things. It's normal. It will come back into my life. So it was a couple of months ago and we were discussing a Christmas present. And I said, he's like, what would you like for Christmas? And I told him, and he's like, how much jewelry do you want? Like, you have so much jewelry. And I just looked at him and said, my love, that's never going to change. Because for me, it's reliving this dynamic I had with my mom. And I just have a love for jewelry. It doesn't have a cap on it. I always find new ways to wear it. And I asked him a question back. I said, why does it bother you so much? Like, why does it bother you? He's like, for me, when is ever going to be enough? And I say, but it's not about being enough. It's how I celebrate. It just brings me joy. There's no like plug to it. So the flex was, okay, let's come up with a few times a year. And in our main times, whether it's Christmas, it doesn't have to be a birthday, but it's our anniversary, can we agree to just doing jewelry at that time? Because for him, it's always like a big heart attack question that happens.
Right, right. So you gave him some predictability, right? Yeah. It's like he doesn't have to deal with it just coming at him. And, there's something for him that this jewelry means something. It probably takes him to a fear place and security. We're going to lose all our money. And he's not able to understand, like, the jewelry for you obviously has it helps you feel connected to your mom. It's not just about, it brings you joy, just all these other reasons.
Yes.
And so you get your need met because you get to predict that this is going to happen and we're not going to have to fight every time. And he gets the predictability. So I think that's lovely.
But at the same time, I also work. So this is another piece. So this is where I really kind of got that piece as well. So if I know certain things are going to tip him over the edge, then instead of forcing him into that conversation, I ask, what are you comfortable with? That is an agreement. But at the same time, I have my own businesses. So at the same time, and I'm like, okay, I have my independence here. So I know not to push him over a certain point because he's going to feel very uncomfortable, right? So I saw a problem, and in my marriage, it would have been a problem. If I was not also working and having my own money coming in, I think it would have been a huge problem and we might have ended up divorced. So I knew that early on. And I said, listen, I'm always going to work because I like my sense of freedom. And I struggle with somebody saying no to me just generally as a person. I like to do things my way. I recognize that's a character flaw, not a character flaw, that's a character thing in me. I don't like necessarily being told what to do, but I'm willing to compromise in a marriage and talk through things. So I think it's best that I have my own money because I would like the choice of doing things. If I want to take a girl's trip, if I would like to buy a handbag, I don't want to ask for permission on those things.
And you shouldn't have to.
Right. And that is the independence I sometimes wonder if maybe might be easier for more women to have when dealing with men like this, like my father, the guy you're describing, which have this hard line and they're like, no, you cannot do this or you can do this.
Well, okay. So I stayed home with my children for 10 years. I had no income and it was all my husband's income. And it just wasn't a problem for us. I mean, maybe we did argue with money. I was definitely more of the spender than he was, but I was also the one that was buying everything for the kids in the home. So understandably, and he was kind of like your husband, grew up very frugal and, had to work for everything he had. But it was, I guess, because I don't know, I guess it was just my husband's perspective was like, we're a team. My money is your money. It's not my money. It's not your money. It's our money. And now that I have money coming in, because I now work, I have the same attitude. Like we just see it as like a big pot.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's how we do it. I guess for other couples, I think it just depends on the couple, honestly.
Agreed.
Like what's comfortable. Yeah. If your husband is aware that I have all this fear and it's just better for everyone if he doesn't have to see it coming from his account because something about it that is triggering, go for it. Just do what works is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
And it's fun. It's funny, but now 5 years being married, it is a team. I'm like, dude, it's both of ours. But I always know the first time I'm going to bring up a conversation about spending, he's going to first like blow up and then he'll come back to me and say, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have done that, but I just get really anxious, like seeing money, big amounts leave my account. But I'm so prepared for the reaction now, Julie. I'm like, okay, so we're going to have to do this in multiple phases. So let's have the first conversation. He's like, I don't want to talk about this. I can't discuss this. And then he comes back and now he's become more aware with all the work that we've done. And he's like, listen, you need to like ease into me because I can't handle it in one go. So it's what you were just saying is learning what to work with your partner, understanding their parameters and understanding the beauty of individuality with each relationship.
Totally. And you might have areas where you're going to get panicked and it helps if he comes to you in chunks with it, and eases you into it. It's kind of like working with each other's nervous systems instead of saying, you just have to get over that, And now that you're saying that, like, I think that, me being the one who's more prone to spending, like, there are probably areas where I might just buy something and not say anything because I don't want to distress him, but it's not being dishonest because if it came down to it, I would tell him it's just like, why?
Why bring it up if you don't need to, just cause anxiety for no reason. It's like if I get a ticket, I'm going to pay for the ticket really quickly and just pretend it never happened because he would be so upset about the ticket.
Totally. So it's just, but if he asked you about the ticket, you're not going to lie.
No, I'll say I got a ticket, but I paid for it. So can we just not talk about it?
And it sounds to me like you can do that because big picture, you have trust for each other.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if you didn't have trust for each other, big picture with a couple, that could be a real problem.
And so I wanted to go into a little bit of the theme of trust. With the rise of like social media and couples also, men and women spending more time online and they fantasize about, you see people online and you just fantasize about their life. You wonder, you're like, oh my God, they live so well and they have this and they have that. Social media is only one slight snippet of what somebody's real life is. But do you see an erosion, a correlation between the use of more social media and the break in trust in more couples? Because their social media, it's easy to meet somebody else and, slide into someone's DM, as they say. Are you seeing that breakdown in trust happening in couples?
Well, I mean, I have to be honest. I have not worked with a couple where that's happened, so I'm kind of looking through the lens of what have I worked with. I think, and I haven't known anyone in my personal life where that's kind of been a problem. So I'm sure theoretically it is a problem. I don't have a ton of experience with that. I might say that things might have, be different, but the same. Like in the past, it was easier to cheat because there wasn't so much tracking on phones and, tracking with credit cards. So maybe it was easier in a different way than it is now. I mean, we are more in touch with people. So yeah, I wish I'm not giving you the best answer, but it's honest.
When it comes to cheating, what is mendable and what is absolutely not mendable? Like what you have seen, like one night, like a one-night affair, because a couple's having an issue, is that a lot fixable all of the times, or is it not?
I think everything is mendable. I mean, within reason, there are certain situations that very big extreme. But what I have seen is everything is mendable for the most part. It's a matter of, is the behavior going to stop? Are we going to understand what led to the behavior and heal that? Whether it's personal stuff, relationship stuff. So if we can heal it, and I have a process for healing it, we have to understand and do a lot of exploration around, the feelings that weren't being managed properly that led to this. And I also need to have them have healing conversations. A lot of times what happens with couples is when they're trying to talk about it, they get stuck in these loops where it's like one person just wants to talk about how bad the other one was. The other one just wants to defend themselves or just shame spiral or just say things like, I've said I'm sorry 1,000 times, instead of really diving in and trying to understand each other and really understand, validate the impact, maybe validate even the partner who did cheat for going back. And, nobody can make a partner cheat. The worst relationship in the world can't make someone deal with that with cheating. But a lot of times when there's cheating, there is some relationship stuff that maybe we need to clean up, a bit underneath the surface. So if the couple is kind of checking all these boxes, then anything is healable,
What is maybe a couple that you worked with that you thought, wow, this is probably one of the toughest cases you've taken on, but they made it out to the other side?
Well, I had a couple, I don't know how much detail I want to give. Let me see if I can twist this around. I'll twist it around in a way that it's not so,
Yeah,
the wife
obvious.
had an ongoing affair with their son's friend who was a teenager.
Okay.
And obviously that's a major problem.
Oh.
But they were able to get through it.
And he was, and how, from when they came in, they sat down with you and they said, hey, Julie, huge problem here. We're in this huge mess, obviously. From that point onwards, how long did it take for them to really and are they as good as new, or they're just kind of making it work?
No, I think they actually ended up with a better relationship. I mean, there were some pretty serious relationship issues going on underneath that. I mean, and in all definitions, it's wrong what she did, right? But if we, just kind of look at this as bad behavior, I mean, most people out there are doing bad behavior when their relationship is distressed in one way, in one way or another. So I just really had to kind of get down and help him understand, like, look, you were contributing in a major way to some relationship issues. You didn't make your wife, go do something that was not only wrong, but illegal. But it wasn't illegal because he was 18, but actually he was maybe even 20, but it wasn't like technically illegal, but
Which is wrong. Yeah.
It is wrong. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, you were contributing here, like you were doing some things in the relationship, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, things like that. And we got to heal all of it. Right. She's got to take responsibility for her part. And really, we got to do some digging and figure out like why she was needing to deal with her feelings by doing this, what was going on with that. I mean, she was 1,000% ready to change. She had carried a ton of shame around that. But, by understanding better about herself and getting to know her feelings and learning how to help those feelings instead of acting out on them, she did her part. And then he was able to take ownership for years of verbal and emotional abuse. And, they were both really committed to seeing their roles and doing the work to change. And also, the work to really better understand each other and empathize while holding at the same time these behaviors are bad and wrong and they're not working. So they were able to heal so much within their own selves and start connecting with each other in a new way that I think, they just built up a new relationship, and they really did. They really were able to heal the past.
That's really beautiful, to come back from something like that and come out on the other side. It's credit to both of them as individuals, and then their commitment to their marriage. Yes, it might have come through a terrible situation, but that shows that they were deeply committed to trying to fix it.
They were. And they were also both, really, their religion was very important to them. I don't want to say their religion didn't allow them to divorce, but they were both very committed to making it work for that reason too.
What religion were they?
They were, I'm not going to say what religion they were because I'm a little, I know the likelihood that they are going to hear this is very low, but let's say they were Catholic. Let's just say that. But they both really had strong ideas about commitment and working through things. And I think that was a real strength for them. You know, people have strengths in different ways, and that was one of their solid rocks that they had to cling to.
And having done this work with so many, couples and having exposure to so many different people and scenarios, what are some of the key takeaways, everybody listening, that you have applied in your practice, tried, trusted, true, has worked for people in conflict, or they're going through a moment of disconnection, or they're just not seeing eye to eye?
Okay, I think that the number one thing we have to do is stabilize these negative cycles, because if there is a communication breakdown, nothing will work. We can't talk about anything if we're going into these interactions where we just end up defensive and attacking and mad at each other and not hearing each other and not being curious and protective. Nothing good is going to come from that. So I've got to get couples to get out of this negative cycle. And probably the biggest game changer when it comes to that is one partner has the needing hat and one partner has the giving hat at a time. And the partner who has the needing hat, they have the floor. They get to talk about their feelings and what they're needing. They can't do it in a way that is, unhealthy, like attacking. They have to really talk about, here's what's happening for me. Here's the vulnerability under this. This left me in a bad spot. And then the partner in the giving hat, their role is just to hear, be curious, tell me more, validate. I really get that. I really get how small you feel in these moments when, I'm telling you not to spend money, or I just give you a hard no. I'm really hearing that leaves you in a really small place. And, I'm sorry for my role in that. And then, I don't ever think it's a good idea to right after that go into switching, because sometimes we need to just sit with one partner being the taker, the receiver. And then later, they switch and the other partner now becomes the giver and the other one becomes the needer. And then when they've gone through that process and they've really, in a very structured way, been curious and validated each other and stepped into each other's worlds and they're softened, then they maybe go into, let's try to work through this problem now with money. Let's try to change the way we talk about it in the future. With that said, it does take some self-work with a lot of people to even get them to the point where they know how to be the giver and be the receiver.
Right. And just having that awareness is a big piece of it, I think, and being like, when do we take turns? When am I able to put my needs aside and, be that giver for the other person, even though I'm mad at them or I'm pissed off at them or I'm still really annoyed about that comment they made last night, but let them have a moment. And that, I think, comes through compassion and empathy for your partner.
And you have to see the value in it. You have to really be able to step back and go, okay, I don't want to do this, I'm mad or, but I'm going to settle my nervous system because it's better than continuing to fight for the rest of our life. There's two alternatives here. So
there's another thing that I love that you talk about. And I want to bring it up. You often talk about how earlier relationships in your childhood shape the way we connect as adults. So for those people who've grown up emotionally distant, or like we said in the beginning of the episode, come from chaotic households, what are the first steps to rewiring those patterns and rewriting them?
Well, the problem is that you didn't get the right kind of emotional support at the end of the day, right? And that lack of emotional support led to attachment insecurity, because we can't feel secure in a relationship if the other person isn't able to be emotionally supportive. And so what happens from there is if you didn't get the right kind of support from your parents or, earliest caregivers or whatever, then you don't know how to support your own emotions. Okay, so if you don't know how to support your own emotions, you're going to have to come up with all kinds of wonky ways to try to relieve yourself emotionally. It's going to cause relationship problems, and, this isn't to say it's all black or white. Some people can help their emotions in some ways and not in others. So then the step here is you got to learn to reparent yourself emotionally. You got to learn how to access your emotions, to validate your emotions, to listen to what they're trying to tell you, and to act on them / communicate them with health. That's it. that's it. If you can't access them, it's just going to be this disorganized blob of stuff inside of you. So you need to be able to access it on a physical level, somatically. You need to be able to organize your emotions, put words to them. If you can't validate them, you're not going to really be able to work with them, because you just want to, you're going to do all kinds of make them go away, or I shouldn't feel this way, or whatever. And then, now it's like, what are we going to do here? What do these emotions need? I need to listen. Sadness needs comfort. Fear needs safety. Anger needs to be heard and needs change. And so we have to figure out how to do that. And then when you can start to manage your own self better, it's so much easier to be in a relationship and show up as your best self and be able to show up for your partner's emotions.
I think another important thing that you just kind of touched upon, and kind of a light bulb went up in my head, is people need to learn the different emotions and differentiate between them, because sometimes fear can show up as anger, but it's not. It's really fear. And where is the fear kind of coming from? Is it fear of rejection? Is it fear of being like, I'm not good enough? And then taking a partner and sitting down and say, hey, I yelled at you because what you were saying made me feel like I wasn't good enough. But it's coming from a place of like, sometimes this is what I felt as a child. So bring that vulnerability into the conversation.
That's it. That's it. I mean, that's the difference between yelling and leaving it at that, and saying, I yelled at you because you did X, Y, Z and you deserved it. And really sitting down and doing what you said, it takes me to this painful place. I've known that painful place, and everything in me wants to just protect that. And so, yelling isn't okay. And I'm sorry I did that. But what's really happening in my heart is a lot of pain. And how is your most partners are going to respond so much more positively to that.
We went through this as a couple and really learned, like, what are the different emotions? How do we apply them in our relationship? Do we make space to talk about them? Do we say, hey, do you have time this weekend? I know we're both really busy at work right now, but could we sit down and talk about it on the weekend so I can tell you what's really going on with me, so you can maybe meet me where I am? There also has to be that you can't just blurt it out. You need to create capacity so there's room for the other person to hear with the right time.
Yeah. Timing is so important.
Yeah.
So important.
And I think that's another piece for anybody listening to this, is finding the right moments so that the other person can be prepared and have the capacity of time to listen to you and process what you're saying and take it in.
It's so true. We want open nervous systems. Yeah. And if we're tired, if we're going to get distracted over and over by kids or phone calls or whatever, or, we're anything, we want to be in a place where we're regulated, reasonably. I understand life happens, but that's why I think it's a good idea. My husband and I have coffee talk. That's what we do. And so
what is coffee talk? Yeah. Tell us about that.
It's not really a structured thing, but it just ends up that on Saturday and Sunday mornings, we sit in the living room where it's quiet before the kids get up. And, we don't always talk about our relationship. Sometimes we talk about other things we have going on. But a lot of times we'll talk about our relationship, and we just know it's there. It's predictable. We can go the whole week. We're so busy, at the end of the day, we just want to watch Netflix or whatever, or the kids are always around. So we just kind of have that sense of predictability. So we don't have to sit there and like hold things in and not know when we're going to get a chance to talk about it. So I think there's so much value in planning out that, or just kind of naturally falling into
it.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's such a widespread loneliness epidemic going on right now? Looking at it from your lens, like just observing it.
Yeah, I just don't think we've lost the art of connection. We have all these good reasons to not have to connect. We can look at our phones. I mean, there's so many distractions. Families are becoming, I think, increasingly dysfunctional, which is the opposite of connecting, and we don't know how to connect, and it's hard. So I think it's just that's it. It's not a matter of physical loneliness. I mean, most people have people around them all the time. It's a matter of just not knowing how to tap into your own emotions and be connected to self, and from that, not being able to connect with others. So I think maybe there's a shift. I love that, I think social media has a lot to offer as far as help for people that in the past didn't have access to help. So I think that hopefully that's one good thing that can come from social media, is just access to help. People can, see therapists virtually now. But still, I'd like to see that shift. I'd like for the conversation, there's a lot of conversation right now about, changing our diets and food, and people are really starting to recognize, what this, unhealthy food chain thing we're in is doing to us physically. And I would like to see that happen, put equal weight on the emotional piece of that too.
Right. That's a really, really just such a wonderful takeaway, is that we should do everything with intention, from the food that we're putting into our body to the relationships and the quality of relationships that we have and how we show up for ourselves, plus how we show up for other people in this world, to have that do everything with intention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think if, this may be a little off topic, but like, I would like to see every couple, when they decide to commit, just do 5 sessions of couples therapy. Just 5. Yeah.
Amen.
Wouldn't that be great? I think
it's amazing. That's an amazing piece of advice. So my husband and I, we have an incredible coach. And I'm really open. I talk about my relationship and stuff because I want women to know that we were in a really tough spot when we first got married. And now, we are pretty rock solid, but it's taken a lot of time, commitment, and us working on it. So we have this incredible coach. She's an independent coach for both of us with work and life and stuff. But she's a communication coach. So the biggest breakdown people have in a relationship is communication. So she teaches us how to communicate. So if I have a problem, rather than just calling him up and blowing up his phone, I'll call her. Her name is Christine. She's wonderful. And I say, Christine, can I vent to you? Can I vent to you first? And you help me formulate my thoughts so then I can go to my husband. And she says, okay. And sometimes I say, you know what? I think I'm still going to blow up. So could we do this call together? Could we just have a call, the 3 of us, and I can tell him what I'd like to talk about prior, or vice versa. Sometimes he's really annoyed and he's like, I really need your help getting through to Iman. And then we come to agreements on our call. And we work through them, and she helps us keep us accountable. And she laughs now. She's like, I only hear from you guys like once a year, once every 6-7 months. She's like, that's a beautiful thing, because that's what I want from my clients, is for them to get to that place. But when we first got together and realized there was a breakdown in our relationship over money and certain things, and I was showing up in one way and he was showing up in another, we got really proactive. We got into plant medicine that's really helped our relationship. And then we got into seeking coaching, because we realized our communication style was off and we were talking over each other versus connecting. And that really helped us lay a foundation to what our marriage is today.
I love it. That's beautiful. That's great.
I want to ask, Julie, with everything you have done, like with this secure relationship, it's impacted so many millions of people. What is next for you? Like, what are you working on? What is next for you currently?
Well, I think my thing right now is my podcast, which is kind of bringing it all together. I wrote the book, and the book is a reflection of the therapy I do with couples. It's kind of like walking them through the self-help version. And then the podcast is meant to bring it to life. Like, this is the work with an actual real couple. And then I think that my next book is going to be like specifically for men. Like, the work resonates with a lot of women.
Yes.
But I really want men to see the value in being more emotionally available, not in a way that they can maintain their sense of masculinity. Because I think a lot of men believe, if I become emotionally available, I'm going to lose my strength or whatever. And I want to really get across to men that enhances your strength and masculinity. My mentor that I learned so much from is an ex-New York City firefighter. He was in 9/11, rescuing people, in the buildings. He's a very masculine guy, but he does this emotional work with couples, and he's, in my opinion, the most brilliant therapist out there. And so we would like to write that together. He works with the NFL, and he works with
incredible,
veterans, things like this. So the military. So
And
so
where can people find your podcast?
It's called the Secure Love Podcast, and it's just, Apple, Spotify, all the platforms.
And it's so wonderful. So you started working with this couple, and how did you convince this couple to come on and share their relationship? And that takes courage. That takes courage to come on and share be coached online for hundreds and thousands of people to see.
Yeah, I put out a cattle call on Instagram, and I got hundreds of applications. It was yeah, it was one of the hardest things that I had to do was narrow it down because these people were just really needing help, and so it was really hard to choose. But it was not definitely was not hard to find a couple. The first couple used their real names. The second couple chose to use fake names, so to preserve their
Identity. Yeah.
confidentiality. But yeah.
And is it done on video where people can
No,
see the
just
okay.
audio. Yep, just
Amazing. Okay,
audio.
so
And then
you
what I
really
do is after we do the session, I go
Mhm.
in and edit in commentary. So I'm like, "Okay, here's why I did this. Here's what I'm hoping for. Here's why I did this," and I kind of explain it, and here's what's going on. And then I kinda try to circle it back to this is how you can use this at home. And then I offer free homework on my website. So people who kinda wanna follow along and apply whatever I did with that couple to their own relationship, they can access the PDFs and do that work together.
I think that's so incredible that you've thought this through in this way because sometimes, yes, you listen to an episode and you're like, wait, how do I work like do this in my personal relationship? And having this workshop not only builds accountability, but gives somebody the tools and the resources to go execute that for themselves.
That's the hope. That's the hope. I know so many people out there just don't have access for whatever reason to help. And so I'm like, okay, this is the best I can do, right? I'm gonna bring it to life and try to circle it back to you. So that's the hope. Yep.
I just love speaking to you. The fact that you're a mother of 6 and I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. You're a therapist, you're an author, you're a podcast host. Like it's
A
just it's
lot.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot, but it's so incredible that you've played that role out for yourself as well. So you're giving advice from a place of like your own, raising 6 kids
Very
back
much.
to back.
Yep. And making and having a lot of failures in that journey. And, until I went back to grad school when my youngest was 1, part of the reason I went back to grad school is because I felt so overwhelmed. I just did not know how to be an emotionally supportive parent. So I have definitely learned a lot along the way.
Thank you so much for coming on and being on Biohack-it. You're my Valentine's Day episode, actually. I'm
Oh,
dropping you this
yay!
week.
Oh my gosh, I love
I
it.
was just so excited to speak to you. Your work is resonating with me for a while from when I discovered you on social media and then,
Awesome.
read your book. And I just was really loved your unique approach to how you give women space to be who they need to be. And not everybody needs to be the same. And every rules apply for different people in different ways and get that
Totally. Yep.
openness with which you're mentoring people, I would say. I don't say it's teaching you really mentor couples to be the best versions of themselves. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Oh, you're so welcome. It was great.
thank you. And so guys, for you're listening, please subscribe to our channel, follow along. I'm going to make sure Julie's obviously input here so you can, follow her for her social media and her podcast. And thank you for tuning in week after week and supporting Biohack-it and our incredible community and building this with me. So thank you for that.